Okay, hello, Pumas. Hello, hello. Um, it's Mr. Keller again. This is going to be my second video on the Thomas Carlyle passage that we did on Monday. So this is not the video that you're going to watch to study for the quiz on Monday. This is a second video. And in this video, I'm going to go over, I'm going to talk a little more about the rhetorical situation of this Thomas Carlyle passage, because I think it's interesting. I think it's worth understanding that if we're going to be, reading it and spending this much time on it. And then I'm going to go over the answers. Um, okay. So I thought I'd talk about the rhetorical situation in Thomas Carlyle's in this sort of essay on Thomas Carlyle uh, with an analogy, with a metaphor. And I want to sort of compare Thomas Carlyle to a pop culture figure that I know some of you are more familiar with. So let's talk for a second about rap music. Let's talk about hip hop and rap music. So in the late 90s and early 2000s, popular mainstream rappers mostly looked like this, um, mostly dressed like this. This was the popular fashion among rappers at the time. And I think this is a great look. You've got, baggy jeans, sneakers, Timbs, you've got some snapbacks, chains, bandanas, some oversized clothes. And this is a great look, but it's a little bit limited, right? Um, you have like some things that a lot of people are wearing, and it's kind of like a limited style. And then in the year 2004, an artist named Kanye West released his debut album. And in all the media cycle and all the music videos and red carpet appearances for that album, Kanye West was dressed like this. And if you were just looking at the last set of images, and now you're looking at this set of images, you're thinking like, what is this guy wearing? He can't. So at the time, people were like, how can he be dressed like this when he's a popular and famous rapper that everyone loves? It was kind of uh revolutionary at the time. I mean, it wasn't not 100%, right? There were certainly artists in the Bay Area like Mac Dre, who also wore polo shirts, and Pharrell Williams was, dressing kind of similar to this at the time too. But Kanye was a real trendsetter in the year 2004, and he kind of changed how a lot of artists in hip hop were presenting themselves. And so you see that influence on a lot of artists. You see that up till today, right? If I Googled Tyler the Creator fashion, you see a lot of similarities in Tyler's presentation with old Kanye West. And Kanye West did this for like the first few years of his career, where every album cycle there would be some new look or some new sound or some new thing that he did that at the time everyone was like what? How can you do that? And then later it would become the norm in hip hop and in pop music. For example, Kanye in his album 2008, he released an album called 808s and Heartbreak. a great album where he sang on every song. And at the time, everyone was like, oh my gosh, a rapper singing on every single song. He's supposed to be rapping. He's not supposed to be singing. So that's 2008. 808s and Heartbreaks comes out. 2009, guess who drops their first major mixtape? You had Drake with So Far Gone in 2009, and then in 2010, Thank Me Later. And now Drake, who raps and sings on most of his music, is one of the number one rappers in the world, right? So that's just another example of Kanye's influence, right? If you look at the album Yeezus, which people didn't like when that album came out, but you can see that album's influence a lot on like rage music. So like Playboy Cardi and Travis Scott or whoever else, those artists have a huge debt in influence to Kanye West as well. The Weeknd is a big one. G-Dragon, the K-pop singer G-Dragon, has listed Kanye West as one of his major like musical and style influences. My lights just turned off. It's okay. So if you're into K-pop at all, Big Bang with G-Dragon was sort of the first one of the first K-pop groups to truly go global. So if you're into like the global rise of K-pop, if you like artists like Big Bang and Twice and BTS and aespa and 17 and all that, a lot of those artists also have a debt in influence to Kanye West, right? So Kanye West is a big deal. Even if you never listen to Kanye West music, you hear his influence in all these other artists, right, that are still making good music. And what's the other side of Kanye West's career that we're all familiar with, right? Well, just earlier this year, this is an example of it. This New York Times headline. Ye takes back apology and calls himself a Nazi in social media rant, right? So Kanye's been on this whole Nazi I love Hitler thing for a few years now. I will confess to you guys that I was a huge Kanye fan in college. I still listen to a lot of his old music. But this has been this for me and for a lot of Kanye's millennial fans, this has been a whole emotional thing for us, right? Where it's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you going on these rants about how black people are responsible for slavery and Jewish people control the world? And it's all just really sick and really depressing, right? To see one of my idols sort of doing this for now, almost 10 years. He's been on this weird tangent. And so if someone says to me, right, if someone says, oh, Kanye West, his whole career is tarnished, his whole influence is just this Nazi thing and this like this direction he's in now. I have really conflicting feelings about it because on the one hand, yeah, it's so horrible that he keeps saying this stuff. But on the other hand, you can't deny his influence and the importance of his earlier art just because this is what he's doing now, right? So why am I talking this long about Kanye West? Well, Mr. Thomas Carlyle, who we read about, has an influence in 19th century Victorian literature that's almost as big, if not as big, as Kanye West's influence on modern music. We got this paragraph on his Wikipedia page, Thomas Carlyle's Wikipedia page, that names a bunch of authors, and I bet some of you will have heard of some of these authors, or if you haven't heard of the author, you might have heard of the books. We've got Arthur Conan Doyle. He's the author of Sherlock Holmes. You've got the Bronte sisters. So writers of books like Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights. I know Wuthering Heights, there's like a movie coming out this year. Um, Marcel Proust is basically the most famous French writer to ever live. George Bernard Shaw, very famous playwright. Herman Melville, the author of Moby Dick, which you've probably heard of Moby Dick. It's a very famous American novel. I love Moby Dick. So this is a real who's who. I mean, if you don't know these authors, that's okay, but this is a real who's who of important and influential writers that people today still read widely and study widely in English classes. So even though Thomas Carlyle, we don't really read him that much anymore, he has that same kind of level of influence, right? So the author of the passage we read was this woman, George Eliot. I have read some George Eliot. Her book Middlemarch is really good. I read that in college, and maybe you'll be lucky enough to read it in college someday too. And George Eliot, you'll notice if you look over here, I think there's no gigantic racism section of her Wikipedia page. She wasn't canceled for being a racist or a proto-Nazi anti-Semite or whatever. Um, she her, so her name, her legal name, her given name was Mary Ann Evans, but she wrote as George Eliot because back then, like I said in the other video, it was very sexist times, so women were not expected to write. It was seen as, men's work to write books. Any woman who wanted to get a book published had to do it under a pseudonym, so had to use a fake man's name. So George Eliot is in the same position as me, where it's like, okay, well, she doesn't agree with Thomas Carlyle's opinions about black people and Jewish people and Catholics and Irish people and whoever else, but she can't deny his artistic influence over her and over other writers of her generation, right? So that's kind of where she's coming from in writing this defense of Thomas Carlyle that we read over in the last video. Okay, so now that we know sort of what her rhetorical purpose is and what the rhetorical situation is, the context she's writing in, let's go over these questions. Okay, so question number one. What is the relationship between the two paragraphs in the passage? You've got two fat paragraphs here. You've got this one and this one. And the answer for number one is A. The first paragraph describes strength of a writer that Carlyle exhibits, right? It starts in paragraph one with he is the most effective educator, and this kind of anonymous he talking about the um, anonymous he talking about the it doesn't say she doesn't say who she's talking about here, right? It's just like great writers do this and this and this and this. And the second discusses his legacy. So the second paragraph talks a lot about, like I said, right? Um, Carlyle's legacy, his influence over other writers, even people who disagree with him, right? I think in question 1B might be tempting, but it only talks about one type of writer, the Carlyle type of writer, in that first paragraph, right? And it sets up a juxtaposition to sort of say, like, a great writer is like this, and this. It's not talking about different types of writers, okay? And I think the other answers are pretty obviously wrong. There's nothing about Carlyle's critics in the first paragraph. There's nothing about Carlyle's influences in the first paragraph. And there's nothing, it doesn't talk about his major ideas. It doesn't mention that he was, you know, a huge racist or anything else that he thought. It doesn't say anything about that in the first paragraph. So those answers are all wrong. Question number two. Which of the following best represents the author's intended audience? The correct answer for this one is A, individuals who are fairly well acquainted with Carlyle's writing. I think you can get this is a hard question, but I think you can get this from the fact that she's name dropping things like Sartor Resartus. I think I mispronounced this in the other video. And Latter-day Pamphlets, right? I mentioned during the read along that I don't know. I guess these are books that he wrote, but I don't know. And so you're seeing George Eliot doesn't stop and say, "Oh, by the way, here's a plot summary of these books that Thomas Carlyle wrote," because she's assuming that her reader already knows what those books are. And yeah, that's how we get the answer for number two. There's some other answers here that could be possible, right? Like it's definitely possible that a writer would hope to produce a book like Carlyle's, and would read this because they are, interested in Thomas Carlyle. But there's nothing in here that's like, hey, if you want to copy Thomas Carlyle, here's the formula for how to do that, right? Same thing with D. I mean, sure, people who want to teach Carlisle might read this, but there's nothing in here that's like, here's how you teach a student to read Thomas Carlyle, right? Nothing in here about his personal life, about who he was married to, who he hung out with, that kind of thing. Okay. Number three, lines 5 through 12, contrast, and the answer here is C, the dissemination of knowledge and the cultivation of intellectual and moral powers. I talked about this a lot in the first part of the read along, right? Where you have, on the one hand, uh, perfecting specific acquirements. So that's like the dissemination of knowledge. I'm telling you a certain fact. I'm telling you that 2 plus 2 equals 4. I'm telling you that Mr. Keller's room number is 234. I'm telling you, I'm reading the dictionary. I'm telling you what this word means. That's disseminating. So disseminating means spreading, disseminating certain facts. And then the cultivation of intellectual and moral powers, right? It uses the word powers here. And then producing that mental condition which renders acquirements easy, making it easy to learn new things and leads to their useful application. That would be an intellectual power, right? And bringing into activity the feelings of sympathies that must issue in noble action. Noble here, I think, means it's like similar to moral, right? So noble action, like noble, very moral, sort of high level, good character action, right? So that's why C is the right answer for number three. Um, yeah. Number four, the answer is B, setting a comparison between conceptually powerful writers and exemplary educators. Exemplary just means good, like very good at their job. Conceptually powerful means, uh, you know, when it's talking about like the influence and the ability to inspire the reader, that sort of directs us here to conceptually powerful writers. Mathematics and education are compared in the first couple sentences, but not in this one. Intellectual challenges faced by writers and readers. So it talks about writers and educators, not writers and readers. Nothing in here about scientific writing. And so the formulation of solutions, I think you could say one side of it is that, right? Like how do you solve a problem? But identifying problems is, I wouldn't say that that's part of the contrast that's set up there. Okay. Number five, the correct answer is D. This is a tough one. Provocative, compelling his readers to reach their own conclusions. Okay. Where does it talk about reaching your own conclusions in the first paragraph? You are not directly fed by his books, so you don't take in new information, necessarily, right? But you feel yourself changed so that you are ready to take in new information, like you're on the top of Mount Everest, right? He's not telling you how to hold the sword. He's giving you the courage and the mental and emotional tools to pick up the sword yourself. He does not enrich your stock of data. This is probably where the sentence where you get it the best. He doesn't enrich your stock of data, doesn't teach you new things. He clears away the film from your eyes so that you yourself can look for new information, right? So this would be my best support for D for number five. A couple of these other answers were very tempting for number five. Revolutionary is usually referring to like a political revolution specifically. So there you could say adopting radical new worldview. I think that kind of goes with what some of the first paragraph is talking about, but I wouldn't say the word revolutionary applies because he's not trying to get, according to this, to George Eliot, to this author, he's not trying to get everyone to agree with his politics. He's trying to have a more sort of mental, emotional transformation. I also think E is really tempting. Sense of awe and veneration. You get that from the sort of going up to the summit. I think that this is in it and masterful. I mean, this author clearly loves Thomas Carlyle. I think that this is all good. The thing that makes E wrong to me is this word overpowering. If you're overpowered, that means you're uh, totally sort of taken over by a feeling or an emotion or an idea, right? You're overpowered. It's like you can't resist something. And at the end here, oops, at the end of the first paragraph, it says subdued to calm and reverence. So if you're feeling calm, that's kind of the opposite of feeling overpowered by something. So this author isn't saying you're like totally mind blown by Thomas Carlyle, like you can't even, you need to sit down because you're like dizzy from how amazing his writing is. It's more like it puts you in a calm, clear-headed, focused and yet totally inspired state of mind. So that's why that answer is wrong. Let's keep going. Number six, I think most people I talked to in class were getting this one right. Number six, the answer is C. The acorns represent ideas in Carlyle's books. He's planting seeds in other people's minds, so his ideas are growing, right? If you burn all of his books, his ideas are already in the minds of the other writers, and they're writing their books that are inspired by his ideas. Just like after you chop down the tree, the acorns are growing into their own trees. Okay, number seven, the correct answer is D. Describe the major impact that Carlyle had on other people. So if you read the full sentence that number seven is from, lines, where are we? The character of his influence, this word, influence, is seen in the fact that many of the men who have the least agreement with his opinions, so his haters, are those to whom the reading of Sartor Resartus was an epoch in the history of their minds, right? So even though they hate him, they were influenced by him, is basically what the sentence is saying. That translates really well to D for number seven. Number eight, the author mentions the Latter-day pamphlets primarily too, and then the answer is C, acknowledge some of the concerns held by the plenty. Okay. So again, this is a part of the passage that's talking about people who disagree with Carlyle's out there ideas, right? There are people who question the justice, right? People who think that Carlyle had some bad ideas. They're questioning him. They're like, I don't think that that's true. I don't think that, these races are biologically inferior to these other races, right? Um, So people, and then people who quarrel, people who fight with exaggerations of this book, right? And so I haven't read this book. I don't even know what it's about. But if, the plenty of people quarrel with the exaggerations, it's like they disagree with his ideas in this, right? So answer number C, if you're acknowledging concerns, right? If I'm concerned about Thomas Carlyle, where am I? If I'm concerned about Thomas Carlyle, it's, that means I have questions about or I disagree with some of his ideas. So that all goes together for answer number C. Error, yeah. Number 9, I think this one's kind of tough. Which rhetorical strategy does the author adopt in lines 44 through 63? So this is asking you to identify a rhetorical strategy. The answer here is E. She gives examples of Carlyle's far-reaching influence, noting that even criticism of Carlyle implies praise. So this one, I don't think there are like clear examples given in that whole section. It's more like examples of like types of people, right? So you have the example of, where are we? Line 44. You have the example of people who read this book even though they disagree with him. You've got the example of people who are questioning his justice. Uh, you've got the example of, yeah. So I don't know. I don't like this answer. Um, A is definitely wrong because she's not insulting people. George Eliot doesn't insult anyone in this. Berating means insulting, like, or like say like talking smack about someone. So she's definitely not doing that. She's not discrediting other arguments. She's not saying that these people who disagree with Thomas Carlyle are wrong. She's not saying that she's doing the opposite of C. She's saying that everyone recognizes his genius, even people who disagree with him. Um, and then she's not saying that all of his opinions are right. She even is saying we have to give him his flowers, even though we don't agree with all of his opinions. So unassailable means like you can't, unassailable means like it's perfect, right? George Eliot's not saying Carlyle's judgments are unassailable. She's not saying everything he ever said was right. She's just saying even if you disagree with him, you have to give him his flowers, right? It's a tough one. I think you can get this answer by, uh, you know, figuring out why A through D are obviously wrong, but it's not my favorite answer. They do this sometimes. They give like an answer that you might have to pick the least wrong answer on some questions on the AP test. Okay. Number 10, what purpose do these lines serve? The answer is A. They contrast the appeal of a writer who merely confirms his readers' views with that of a writer who boldly challenges them. We talked about this a lot. The contrast here. You might meet a man who you agree with him on everything, but he just has bad vibes. He has all the right opinions, but he just sucks to be around. While another man, here's the contrast comes in here. Another man might say some out-of-pocket stuff, dangerous paradoxes, but you just feel so good to be around him, right? Um, and so, yeah, it's hard to find like boldly challenging views, right? Nature seems to reflect the land feeling. I guess, yeah, dangerous paradoxes, warms your heart by the pressure of his hand. That's how we're getting boldly challenging your views. I don't know. That's a tough one for me. I don't know if that would be justifiable on the modern AP test, but there you go. Number 11, line 75 through 83. The author develops her rhetorical purpose. The answer here is D, delaying the conclusion of the independent clause to build up the reader's sense of anticipation. Um, this is a long, long sentence. He says it so finely, with so hearty conviction. He makes the object, da da da. He appeals so constantly, da da da, that we are obliged to say here, here. So it's like the sentence keeps going and going and going, and you have a sense of suspense over like how is the sentence going to end? And then you finally get the point that you are going to say here, here. So you're going to cheer on Thomas Carlyle before you can give the decorous oh, before you can say, yeah, but he said that other bad thing that I don't agree with, right? So stretching the sentence out, adding in these phrases and dashes and all these other details, it builds suspense and anticipation. We talked about that in class with the example of how the thing that's emphasized usually comes at the end of a sentence, right? If I say, uh, if I say, I'm lactose intolerant, but that pizza looks delicious, you think I'm going to eat the pizza. If I say that pizza looks delicious, but I'm lactose intolerant, you think I'm not going to eat the pizza. It's because of what I'm emphasizing through how I construct my sentence. And this is sort of like a longer version of that with answer D. Right? Couple of these other answers for number 11 might look tempting, but there's nothing in this passage about how Carlyle is critical of everyone else. It's not like he's a rogue hater. It doesn't say anything about him hating on anyone. Uh, it doesn't mention any of his most influential ideas or opinions. It doesn't say what he thought. It says how he made other people feel. I would say C is tempting because this section does employ dramatically urgent adverbs, right? I think you could make the case that, for example, finally, with such hearty conviction, constantly, you could say that those are dramatically urgent adverbs, right? Um, but I wouldn't say the conclusion of that sentence is surprising. I think that if you've been reading the passage, you kind of get the idea already that George Eliot is saying you have to give Carlyle his flowers, even if you disagree with him. That's kind of a recurring theme, so it shouldn't be surprising to the reader. And then E is wrong because here, here is imitating a chorus of approval for Carlyle, but oh is not. Oh in this context is meaning more like, oh, he has bad opinions, right? Okay, those are the answers. I hope that was helpful and interesting. Again, next week after the quiz, I look forward to getting people's feedbacks, if these videos are helpful in your learning or not. Um, I am not editing the videos because I'm not like set up to do that right now. But I know it's kind of it's me rambling unedited. I might try and, get, figure out how to boot up iMovie or something so I can cut out all my weird little rambles and stuff. So let me know if you think that's a good idea. I don't know. Anyways, uh, go Pumas, and I will see you guys soon.